In a short while, we'll also have our guest join us, our contributor Sreeram Chaulia and our partner and editor-in-chief of newsmobile.in Sreeram Chaulia. Meanwhile, we'll also have our executive editor Abhishek Kapoor and my other colleague Snehish Alex Phillips joining us from the Delhi studio.
But Sreeram Chaulia and Sreeram Chaulia continuously joining us on this live broadcast. Sreeram Chaulia, to you first. How do you see this bonhomie between Putin and Modi? The ease with which they were walking yesterday at 7 LKM and they went into a long session of discussion where bilateral ties and other strategic aspects were discussed as well. Do you think S-400 is significant for India and certainly could be a game changer without any hurdles, and US would understand?
Aditya, the chemistry between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin actually is a signal that we have in India a government that puts nation first and India first above everything else. We have a nationalistic Prime Minister who believes that Russia is very, very pivotal and remains central to our national security needs and interests for our geopolitical positioning in the world, and we are never going to abandon that. I think that's very clear. Despite the Damocles' sword of cat's eye and of potential US sanctions, we are hosting President Putin so openly and so warmly and in such a high-profile manner. And if you recall, we have had an informal summit in Sochi as well, where the two leaders bonded. I think Narendra Modi sent out a very clear message. We do want strong ties with the United States, but it is not at the cost of our traditional allies and partners. And it's clear, as you said, S-400, the Air Force Chief has said it is a booster dose for our national security. And no compromises on that, and frankly, we are going to be firm with the United States if need be on this matter. We have tried to be diplomatic with them. Our NSA, Ajit Doval, has been directly confabulating with Mike Pompeo and Jim Mattis about it. And we know that at least, if not Trump, his second in command, Jim Mattis and especially Jim Mattis, believes that India is essential for their Indo-Pacific strategy. So we are going to emphasize the broader strategic relationship and say, look, if you want China to be contained, if you want balance in Asia, don't place hurdles to India's rise. And S-400 is essential for India's rise, and we cannot make any compromise on that.
Absolutely. Sreeram Chaulia, are you of the same opinion that certainly it is the ball in US's court? Because remember, it's not just US. China would be watching very closely as well. Last night, Mike Pence came out with a statement, the US Vice President, saying that China was conspiring to oust Donald Trump, and they are carefully monitoring the situation. Remember, it's not just India and Russia. There's a parallel defense, important, significant ties between India and the US as well. Do you think, in case, highly unlikely, but in case sanctions are imposed, that could endanger that kind of a relationship as well?
Well, definitely, I think, Aditya, the US has major commercial interests in our defense market. Remember that the share of the US defense in Indian market has actually been rising fivefold over the last decade. They were almost at zero, and now they are selling cumulatively 15% of India's total arms imports. So if the US imposes sanctions on us, let us say hypothetically, there will be large American defense contractors whose own commercial interests are going to be hurt by it. We are a large market, and people say in the defense field it is a buyer's market, especially large buyers like us. So I don't think Trump is going to actually walk the talk and do it, because this is more like posturing to try and shift the balance a little more in the US favor for their defense contractors. And sanctions will actually go the opposite effect and will actually reduce American suppliers and their market access to India. But I think they are looking to improve their share. If so, the wisdom, Ambassador Carter talked about wise wisdom, it also makes economic rationale not to go ahead.
Like we were discussing a short while back, apart from the significance of this deal, the important point also here being how is US looking at it, and Sreeram, at first I have to come to you for that.
I think the Trump administration needs to also see the larger picture of the region. I mean, Russia, they have a problem with Russia with regard to alleged meddling in US elections. They have a problem with Russia's role on the frontiers of the EU. in Ukraine, but they don't really have a big clash of interest in Indo-Pacific region. Although Russia is deferring to China, overall the Russians are not big players in Indo-Pacific. So I think the biggest challenge the US faces in the long term, as has been stated in the US national security strategy, is the revisionist powers. They say both China and Russia, but especially China, because China is a much more capable country than Russia to overtake the United States in both economic and military and geopolitical realms. So if that is the case, and if they have identified China as the number one problem in terms of a rival, then India should automatically become central to them, and that has been the case for the last 10-15 years, why US-India strategic partnership has grown so much. But now if Trump is not able to see the big picture, we are very keen that at least the second rung, Jim Mattis and the rest of the Defense Department and other in the permanent establishment of the US foreign policy, the strategic elites, they are on our side, and that's important. I want to highlight one factor here. Jim Mattis asked US Congress for waiver for 3 countries from CASA: Indonesia, Vietnam and India. Why? These 3 are obviously very, very central for the United States to contain China's growing hegemony and to stabilize Asia. So Indonesia, Vietnam and India, if they are not being given waiver from sanctions, it means Trump is hacking at his own US national security strategy and the long-term interest of the United States. And it is our duty and our right to point that out and to say that, look, don't hack at your own.
In a few minutes from now, we will in fact have Sreeram Chaulia.
My question is to Sreeram Chaulia, because he has watched Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy very closely. Prime Minister Modi is engaging with Russia because he does not want to give an impression that we have gone firmly in the American bloc.
Absolutely, Abhishek. I think to rise as a great power, we cannot hitch our wagon to existing superpowers. I think Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy, as you're mentioning, is being to extract benefits from all sides as much as possible. We don't want this US-Russia Cold War. We don't want, if the United States is countering China and is very firm about it, that has geopolitical benefits to us. But if the United States has, long-standing animosity towards Russia and they are fighting, in all spheres, including information warfare, it's not good for us. We should not be forced to make choices like this. And I think we are making a clear point here. We don't want to be caught in the crossfire between these giants. Rather, we want benefits from both sides because we don't threaten either of them. So it's very important. Trump has been, because of his focus on trade and economic grievances, has also unfortunately trained guns at India on tariffs and such things. But overall, if he sees the big picture, India can only be enabled to rise to become China's equal if they stop bothering us with these sanctions threats.
Right.
They have to come out clearly with the waiver issue. And secondly, I think they need to focus more on military maneuvers in the Indo-Pacific region. So the Quad idea we have.
Sreeram Chaulia, please hold your thoughts. So, Sreeram Chaulia, it's clear that India is in a mood to exercise a strategic autonomy, and India believes that we are not in any bloc, something that was underscored by Prime Minister Modi in the Shangri-La dialogue that I was earlier mentioning. So you think this S-400 deal is just one indication of India, announcing to the world that we are here as a global power, a major power, and we are going to exercise our strategic autonomy?
That's right, Abhishek. It's a signal to the entire international community because people are so vexed in many ways with many of Trump's shenanigans, and they're asking, will India stand up for its own self-interest and actually show Trump that we are willing to be bold in our diplomacy? So because many people had earlier bracketed Narendra Modi as somehow pro-Western, and I have always maintained he has only one agenda, which is India first. And today we are showing that, and I think as far as the Russian approach goes, they are also going to be very critical for our energy security and not just defense. Remember, Dharmendra Pradhan, our Minister for Petroleum, has said that we are going for gasification of the economy. Eventually, we are going to move out from coal. And Russia is the world's largest exporter of gas, and we are already, the LPG consignments have started coming to Gujarat from Russia. We need to open up more routes. The north-south corridor from Russia through Central Asia, that has been stalled for a long time. These are going to actually take India forward and make us a great power. So while the United States is important, there's no way we can abandon the Russians, and that is the big strategic message that's going out today. And we are saying that this is historic.
Why is it historic?
19 bilateral summits have been happening for the last 20 years, every year. Many of these visits have been routine, but this is historic because today we are making a stand for our nation and for our national interests.
You think Prime Minister Modi, I'll put this question first to Sreeram Chaulia and then to Saurabh, that Prime Minister Modi is engaging with President Putin because he sees, as he had mentioned in the Goa summit 2 years back, that one friend in hand is better than two in the bush, or some that kind of statement that Prime Minister had made. So essentially he was perhaps trying to assuage Russian concerns that India is getting too close to America for their concern. Sreeram.
Abhishek, it is true that we have relatively reduced the Russian component in our defense trade over the last couple of decades. In fact, even until 2012, Russia was supplying nearly 80% of all our weapons imports. Now it is down to 62%. But with the signing of the S-400 and the Krivak, the frigate, the battleships, it may again rise up to beyond 70%, which means that Russia, we are recognizing the technical quality and superiority of Russian hardware. I mean, that's beyond ideology. I mean, the Mera Jota Hai Japani was about, socialism, communism, and we were all in the post-colonial mood. But now it is more realistic, and it is based on the fact that Russians still have a lead in military technology, and nobody can dispute the fact that S-400 is far superior to the THAAD or the Arrow anti-missile systems of the Israelis or of the Americans. So we will go for whoever is technically most competent, and in this case, Vladimir Putin has a right to have a swagger with President because his military output is still superior.
Now, Sreeram, of last couple of years we have seen the Russians beginning to engage with Pakistan. There are at least 2 defense exercises, and then we have had them negotiating with the Pakistanis on the issue of Taliban. You think that's something that should concern India, and then India should be raising that with the Russians in these talks that are taking place, Sreeram?
Not to forget the sale of attack choppers.
Yes, Snehaj, I think we do need to improve our coordination with the Russians on Afghanistan and the end game, if at all there is one. Because I think the Russians, because they have traditionally an antagonistic position to the Western agenda in that region, they tend to think that they need to talk to Taliban and see how they could come in as peacemakers and as deal makers there. And for that they are willing to have back channel talks with the Taliban, which has caused discomfort in India. So we do need to improve our coordination with the Russians on this fact. And remember, there's also an ISIS factor in Afghanistan now. They are carrying out so many suicide bombings against Shiites and other minorities, and there is a ISIS branch that has emerged in Tajikistan and some of the former Soviet republics in that region, and Russia is most concerned about the entry of that kind of ISIS into the Russia proper, and so there will be convergence between us in Central Asia, and Russia is also very wary of China about Chinese hegemony in that region, in Central Asia. You see, the Chinese are giving out so much.
But what exactly is Pakistan's position now? Because we've seen in recent times how the United States has. I'm also saying good afternoon to Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, who's with us. And Sreeram, I'm sure you'll have a take about that handshake and the very fact that the entire world today is watching what is happening. Putin, I think, only spends about 23 hours in India. But look at what we are talking about already. The entire world is looking at that bonhomie. The entire world is looking at Sreeram. About the fine balancing act, I think that India is getting into when it comes to both Russia and the US.
My question would be to my guest on our channel, Sreeram and Sreeram Chaulia. Given we're focusing on defense, we're focusing on the S-400, a historic deal that has been signed at 11 in the morning, and Republic broke it first. But as Aditya, my colleague, was mentioning, we are going in for about 19 different agreements. And as Abhishek Kapoor pointed out, this spans from defense to space, railways, and energy too. So how big is this a message that has been sent out to Russia that fret not, we are with you, we stand by you?
No, very much so. I think we need to broad base this relationship. It cannot simply be oil and gas and weapon systems. So I think diversifying it is important. Our trade, bilateral trade, is only around $10 billion per annum, and we have been, working out ways to expand it. Sushma Swaraj had met her Russian counterpart just last month, and we were talking about diamonds and pharmaceuticals and IT, people-to-people linkages. Those are the kind of the routine wheels on which these big deals can stand for a long time, and that's where we need to do a lot more. As you know, unlike the Soviet era, the Druzhba Dosti spirit today is largely limited to defense and to some extent to energy, which is coming up. So we need to do a lot more space. I think I want to highlight that our Prime Minister has made a commitment to the nation that we will be sending our moon mission and our unmanned space mission, and for all these things we will need Russian support. Russians are committing to enable not only in terms of training but also to jointly do it with us. So there are a lot of things, transfer of technology in many fields. We need to do more. This is such a big strategic relationship.
And we also have a lot to tell our viewers, a lot perhaps, Sreeram, that will come out, I think, through the